Hey everybody, and welcome to another deep dive.
Absolutely.
Today we're looking at English pronunciation.
Okay.
Specifically, we have this transcript from a YouTube video
Yeah.
by teacher Rayner called TikTok Live Noon 2024 Class Hashtag to the Alphabet.
Right.
And it's kind of a fascinating format because
Yes.
it appears to be a live English lesson
Mm-hmm.
conducted on TikTok primarily for Spanish speakers.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got sort of this fun challenge of deciphering the unique
Yeah.
format and occasional Spanish phrases.
Awesome.
But when you take a look at it,
Yeah.
what are some of your initial impressions?
Well, it's a really interesting approach, I think.
Okay.
One of the things that I noticed right away is that they
Yeah.
emphasize this key difference
Yeah.
between Spanish and English, and that's the number of vowel sounds.
Right.
So, like, while Spanish has 5 vowel sounds, English has 10.
Wow.
And each of those vowels has a short and a long pronunciation.
Well, that's interesting because, like, right away in the video, teacher Rayner was using examples like apple for the short A and then cake for the long A.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, wow, that can really change the way a word is pronounced.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you think,
Yeah.
I mean, what's the challenge there for Spanish speakers?
Yeah,
And how is teacher Rayner tackling that in this video?
it's a huge challenge
Right.
because, for Spanish speakers, they're used to having just those 5 vowel sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they come to English and they're faced with these 10 different vowel sounds and then the short and long variations of each, it can be really overwhelming.
Right.
So what teacher Rayner does in this video is they really focus on getting learners to recognize and to practice those distinct sounds.
Okay.
So they relate them back to Spanish vowel sounds where possible.
Okay.
For example, they point out that the short A sound is very similar in both languages,
Right.
but then they also emphasize the importance of listening as a
Mhm.
crucial element of learning. Because you have to really pay attention to how native speakers are pronouncing words in order to distinguish these subtle vowel differences.
It's funny because at one point, teacher Rayner almost said consonant instead of vowel.
Right.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah,
Like, even they get it mixed up sometimes.
it happens.
So I'm curious,
Yeah.
as someone who might be used to
Uh,
a language with, just 5 vowel sounds,
right.
what are some tips for training your ear to hear these differences?
I think one of the best things you can do is to focus on what we call minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs.
So these are words like ship and sheep or sit and seat that differ by just one sound.
Right.
And by listening to and repeating these pairs, you can start to tune your ear
Okay.
to those very subtle distinctions that make all the difference in meaning.
Right.
Another thing that's really helpful is just to immerse yourself in English
Okay.
as much as possible. So listening to podcasts, watching movies, even
Okay.
listening to music, all of that can help you to start to internalize those sounds, even
Okay.
if you're not actively focusing on every single word.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay. So then they moved on to consonants.
Yes.
And they used kind of an interesting approach, I thought. They categorize consonants as being either voiced,
Right.
which means your vocal cords vibrate when you say them, or voiceless,
Yes.
which means they don't vibrate.
Exactly.
And in the video, teacher Rayner was having everyone put their hand on their throat
Right.
so that they could actually feel the vibrations.
Yeah, I love that method.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's so effective,
It's great.
especially for people who are more hands-on learners.
Totally.
They can actually feel that difference.
It's like so abstract, when you're talking about like phonetics,
Yeah.
but to be able to physically feel it
Yes.
is really cool.
Exactly.
And the contrasted sounds like S,
Uh-huh.
which is voiceless, and Z, which is voiced.
Hey.
And it's amazing how just that little difference
Yes.
really changes the sound.
It does.
How important do you think that is?
I think it's really crucial,
Okay.
especially when you consider, minimal pairs again,
Yeah.
this time with consonants like
Yeah.
sip and zip.
Right.
That one little vibration in your vocal cords
Wow.
makes all the difference.
Totally changes the word.
It does.
So teacher Rayner was pointing out that this can really matter in things like spelling names or giving directions.
Absolutely.
There was actually a comment from a learner
Okay.
who was saying that they were having trouble
Uh-huh.
with this whole voiced and voiceless concept.
Right.
What kind of advice would you give to that learner?
Well, I think the key is practice.
Okay.
So one thing you can do is make a list of those minimal pairs, like bat and pat or dog and tog,
Right.
and then you can practice saying them out loud,
Okay.
really focusing on how your mouth and your throat feel different for each sound.
Gotcha.
You can even record yourself and listen back to check your pronunciation.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I like how Teacher Rayner was saying that
Yeah.
Spanish actually has
Yeah.
this distinction between voiced and voiceless more clearly than English.
That's true.
So it's like they're building on something
Yes.
that the learners already know.
It's a great starting point.
Okay, cool. So we've covered vowels, we've covered consonants,
Uh-huh.
but English wouldn't be English without some tricky letter combinations.
Oh, absolutely.
And Teacher Rayner specifically called out EIA
Right.
and BV
Yes.
as being troublemakers.
Those are notorious for sure.
I know. And it was funny because they were kind of self-deprecating about it.
Uh-huh.
They're like, yeah, I used to struggle with this too.
It happens.
Why do you think those are such common trouble spots?
Well, they often defy the typical pronunciation rules.
Okay.
And for Spanish speakers in particular,
Yeah.
it can be especially difficult because their language follows different patterns.
Right. So what were some of the tips
Yeah,
that Teacher Rayner offered?
Well, one thing they recommended is using memory techniques, like creating mental associations with the letters.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, connecting E with email
Right.
to remember its sound in that context. For B and V, they really emphasized practicing the subtle differences in how you position your lips and your tongue.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then they also used some real-world examples.
Right, like Becky G.
Exactly.
For G.
Yeah,
I thought that was clever.
it is.
But why Becky G?
Well, I think it's brilliant because not only is Becky G
Okay.
a recognizable name for many Spanish-speaking learners,
Right.
but the G sound in her name is very similar to the Spanish J sound,
Oh, wow.
which is often confused with the English G.
Fascinating.
So it's a way of connecting something new to something familiar.
That's really clever. I never would have thought of it that way.
Great technique.
Okay, so we've talked about the memory techniques and the real-world examples.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout this whole lesson, Teacher Rayner has really been emphasizing spelling.
Yeah.
What do you think the reason for that is?
Well, I think it's because, even if perfect pronunciation takes time and practice,
Yeah.
accurate spelling is a skill
Okay.
that you can use immediately in
That's-
so many situations.
Oh, like what?
Think about writing emails,
Uh-huh.
filling out forms, even just texting with friends.
Yeah.
Correct spelling ensures that your message is understood.
It's so true. It's like in this day and age, spelling is so important.
It really is.
And it's not just about, getting a good grade on a test.
Right.
It's about communicating
Exactly.
in the real world.
It's about giving learners the tools they need to be successful in all sorts of contexts.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we just talk about the format for a minute?
Sure.
I mean, this live lesson,
Yes.
it's so energetic.
And-
It's so engaging.
Yeah.
You've got the interactive quizzes. You've got the real-time feedback.
The chat is so lively.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's great.
People are like talking about their dinner plans
Right.
and trying to answer quiz questions at the same time.
Yeah.
How do you think this kind of format impacts the learning process?
I think it makes a huge difference
Okay.
because that real-time interaction
Yeah.
keeps learners actively involved and motivated.
Right.
Even when the topic is something as potentially dry as pronunciation.
Right. And it's also building a sense of community.
Absolutely.
Like everybody is in it together.
Yeah. It's like they're all part of this learning journey.
And it's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly.
And to laugh at yourself.
And to learn from each other.
Yeah.
It's a really supportive atmosphere.
I love that.
And that's so important for language learning
Uh-huh.
because it encourages people to take risks and try new things,
Like
even if they're not sure if they're going to get it right.
That's such a great point.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts was where someone was asking about the EIA rule.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time in the chat, they were talking about what they were having for dinner.
That's great.
It's just so real.
It is.
It shows that language learning is,
Yeah.
part of our lives.
It's not just something that happens in a textbook.
Right.
It's integrated into everything we do.
I think one of my biggest takeaways so far
Mm-hmm.
is that Teacher Rayner just has this way of making English pronunciation
Yeah,
feel less intimidating
absolutely.
and more approachable,
I agree.
especially for Spanish speakers.
It's a testament to their skill as a teacher.
So what have we learned so far?
Well, we've learned about the importance of understanding the building blocks of pronunciation. We've talked about the need for consistent practice.
Right.
And we've seen how important it is to find ways to make learning fun and engaging.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a reminder that language learning is not just about memorizing rules. It's about developing an ear for the nuances of sound and feeling confident enough to use your voice.
Even if you make mistakes along the way.
Exactly.
All right. So can you hear the difference between those short and long vowel sounds now?
I think so.
And how about those memory tricks?
Yeah, those are really helpful.
So think about what works for you.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back in just a minute
Sounds good.
to tackle the next part of this pronunciation adventure.
Looking forward to it.
Huh.
Okay, so now we get to see it in action. Teacher Rayner does a live spelling exercise with the students.
Yeah, so it's one thing to know the rules, right? But to actually use them is a whole other...
Yeah, it's like, the rules of the game.
Right.
But can you actually play?
Exactly.
Yeah, right?
Okay, so what are they doing in this section?
Well, they start with some pretty basic words.
Okay.
Things like house, table, cell phone, university.
All right.
And I noticed that they repeat each word a couple of times.
Yeah, I think that's good for people.
Yeah, it helps them to hear those sounds.
Really hear the sounds.
And process them before they try to spell.
Yeah, and they actually break down each word.
Yes.
Like letter by letter.
Letter?
Letter by letter.
And it's kind of cool because it's like they're anticipating the places where learners might have trouble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're offering that extra support.
Yeah, it's like, okay, be careful with this sound.
Yeah.
Make sure you're hearing this correctly. There were some more fun words too, like notebook.
Oh, yeah.
And street. And then America.
Oh, yes.
Which I thought was great because it's got that EIA.
Exactly. All three of those tricky vowels.
So it's like, okay, can they spell this one?
Right. Are they paying attention to those sounds?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then they went on to like longer, more complex words like air conditioner. Yeah. They gradually increase the difficulty.
I love that gradual.
Yeah, it's like climbing a mountain.
Right.
You start with the smaller peaks, and then you work your way up to the summit.
It gives you a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And you can tell that the learners are really getting into it.
Oh, yeah.
The chat is going crazy.
People are excited.
They're celebrating when they get something right. They're asking questions. There was this really funny moment where someone misspelled America as emirate.
Oh, that's great.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, close, but...
Yeah, but it shows how easy it is to make those mistakes.
Right.
When you're focusing on so many sounds.
So many sounds at once.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they reveal all the correct spellings.
Right.
And most people got like
9
out of 10, right?
Impressive.
Which I thought was pretty good.
And then what happens next?
Well, just when you think the lesson is over. Teacher Rayner gives them homework.
I know. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I thought this was supposed to be a fun TikTok live.
Right, but it makes sense.
It does. Practice is so important.
You got to keep practicing. So what's the homework assignment?
So they have to watch another video.
Okay.
And spell out 20 words.
Wow.
From that video.
That's like pronunciation boot camp.
It is. But it's a great way to apply what they've learned in a different context.
It's like taking it beyond the classroom.
Into the real world of English media.
Okay, so even though this was designed for Spanish speakers, what are some of the takeaways for anybody?
I think there are tons of takeaways.
I
mean, first of all, the importance of understanding those building blocks.
The building blocks.
Of pronunciation.
Yeah.
Vowels, consonants. And then also the need for consistent practice.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just learn it once.
You have to keep practicing.
You've got to keep using it.
And then finding ways to make it fun and engaging.
Because if it's not fun,
right,
you're not going to want to do it.
Exactly.
And I think also it's a reminder that language is alive.
Yes, it's constantly evolving.
It's not static.
Right.
It's constantly changing.
And it's not just about memorizing rules.
Right.
It's about developing that ear for the nuances and feeling confident.
Even if you make mistakes.
Exactly.
So one of the things that really stood out to me was how Teacher Rayner really emphasized that this is about communication.
Right.
In the real world.
It's not just about, passing a test.
Right.
It's about equipping you with the skills you need to navigate the world.
And it's not just the practical stuff. It's also about feeling confident to express yourself.
Yes.
You know?
No matter what your accent is.
Regardless of your accent.
Or your level of fluency.
I thought it was really interesting how often the students were asking questions.
Yes.
And clarifying. Like they weren't just accepting information.
They were actively engaged.
They were really thinking about it.
And that's how real learning happens. It's not a passive process.
So we've covered a lot.
We have.
The vowels, the consonants.
The tricky combinations.
The practice session.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating journey
I know.
through the world of pronunciation.
And we've seen how teacher Rayner, you know, breaks it down.
Really skillfully.
Explains things clearly. Gives good examples.
Yeah.
Lots of encouragement.
And it's a reminder that language learning is a continuous process of discovery and growth.
So think back to those vowels. Are you starting to hear the differences now?
I am.
What about those memory tricks?
Those are really helpful.
Have you found anything that resonates with you? And we'll be right back to delve into the final, and perhaps most surprising part of this pronunciation adventure.
Okay, so welcome back to our pronunciation deep dive.
All right.
We've covered a lot of ground vowels, consonants, tricky combinations.
Yeah, even that live practice session.
I know, it's been amazing. But teacher Rayner still had one more thing up their sleeve.
What is it?
They went back to the basics, the alphabet.
The alphabet.
Yeah. Why? I know it seems so simple, right? But think about it.
Okay.
How often do you have to spell things out loud?
Oh, yeah, like over the phone or giving my email address.
Exactly. And if you can't pronounce those letters clearly, it can lead to all kinds of misunderstandings.
Right.
And teacher Rayner didn't just go through the alphabet. They really broke down each letter.
Okay.
And they focused on, the correct pronunciation and the ones that the Spanish speakers often mix up. Like what?
Like E and I, B and V, G and J.
Those are tough.
I know. And they even brought back those memory tricks.
Oh, yeah.
Like E for email, I for iPhone, Becky G for G.
It all comes back to Becky G.
I know. It's like she's the key to English pronunciation.
Right.
And they even talked about the letter Z.
Oh, Z or dealized.
I know.
That's a big one.
That's the debate, right?
It is.
Even native English speakers don't agree on that one.
So what did they recommend?
They said just go with Z.
Okay.
Keep it consistent.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm really impressed with how teacher Rayner makes pronunciation not only fascinating, but really approachable.
Absolutely.
For everyone.
Yeah, they have a real talent for making it fun.
It's like they're passionate about it. And that makes you want to learn.
It does.
So what are your biggest takeaways?
Well, I think the biggest one for me is that there's no one right way
to learn pronunciation. You've got to find what works for you.
Yeah, experiment with different strategies.
Like those memory tricks, the minimal pairs, just immersing yourself in the language.
Exactly.
And I think it's also important to remember that language is always changing.
It is.
It's not static.
It's constantly evolving.
So be curious, be open to new sounds, and don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly. Because mistakes are just part of the process.
Stepping stones.
All right, so to all of our listeners out there, keep practicing, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep sharing your unique voice with the world.
That's what it's all about.
Until next time, happy pronouncing.